What up, BookTube? Sandy Goldston back here with my June 2022 reading wrap-up. I have been struggling, been slumping really bad in terms of reading. Not so much in terms of writing, but as far as reading, I've really been slumping. So I did use the month of June to get back on track. And while it was not a prolific reading month, on par with some of my really prolific reading brothers and sisters out there in BookTube, it was pretty good. And most importantly, it sort of got me back on track, even though Goodreads might disagree. I'll talk about that next. All right, so Goodreads has been riding me pretty hard, telling me that I was like 4, 5, 6 books behind. I think I just caught back up and I'm like 4 books behind, getting close to being 3 books behind. So I'm slowly catching up, getting myself back on track. And that was something that I was hoping to do this summer in terms of my reading goals, my reading expectations. So that all brings us here to the month of June. In the month of June, I ended up reading 5 books this month. And 4 were fiction books, and 1 was a nonfiction book that kind of hit close to home that I was really excited about reading. I'd had in my collection for a while, but I hadn't gotten around to, and I finally said, you know what, now's the time, because I knew as soon as I started reading it that it was going to be a quick read, or at least I strongly suspected it was going to be a quick read as soon as I jumped into it. So I jumped into it, and it did. I read it, I devoured it in like a day. So it was a really good read, but I will get to that one in a little bit. I'm going to go in chronological order of the books that I read. So that's coming up next. I'm going to start with an author that I have really come to enjoy, and it took me a while to really discover this author, but the author is Taylor Jenkins Reid, and so I started with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and that ended up being my fiction book of the year when I read it, and then I was so excited about that. I jumped right into Daisy Jones and the Six because that was another book that I had, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So I was 2 for 2 with Taylor Jenkins Reid. And then I had another book of Taylor Jenkins Reid on my shelf, one of my shelves here, and as you can see, I have many shelves. And that was Malibu Rising. And so I had Malibu Rising for a while, and I've been waiting for an opportunity to get into it. So I finally jumped into it, and while I didn't love it as much as I did 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, it was an interesting read. Takes you back to the 1980s. A group of people, they're at this house and things start to happen. The house catches on fire. There's crazy stuff going on, and it's a really interesting read. It's a fast read. It's an engaging read, and I know a lot of people have reviewed it and liked it. It was a solid read. I enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book, but it was pretty good, and she continues to be hot. She has moved into automatic buy status for me. She has a book coming out about one of the characters that's in this book, Carrie Soto, a tennis player, maybe kind of a retired tennis player, something like that. And anyway, she's coming out in a book this summer, so she's going to get her own book this summer. I believe in August that book is going to drop, maybe late August. So looking forward to that. I think I've already pre-ordered it, if I can remember correctly. I think so. Anyway, this is a good one. Taylor Jenkins Reid continues to deliver. Next up, I read The Counselors by Jessica Goodman. This was another pre-order for me, and I was excited about this because I've read Jessica Goodman before, and I've really liked her, and this is another book that really had me excited because you have a summer camp, you have camp counselors, you have camp versus town, you have townies and campers, and it's like a prestigious camp and it's an expensive camp, and there are secrets and there are bloody secrets, and it's just really like right down the street for me. This is perfect. This is exactly the kind of books that I like to read. YA, suspense, set at a campground or school campus, college campus, high school campus, boarding school, whatever you want to throw at me. This embodies that. So very good. Jessica Goodman does a great job of building suspense in her stories, and the things that you see that you really get attracted to, like secrets and something that happened, and the secrets are going to make things boil up to the surface, all packed into this one. This is a very good, very quick read. The Counselors by Jessica Goodman. Next up, I shifted gears and I went to nonfiction, and this is a book that the algorithm, I think, on Amazon found me for this particular book, and I was really excited to read it when I saw it. It is Redefining Normal by Justin and Alexis Black, a true story about two kids growing up in foster care and facing the odds, beating the odds, finding themselves together, even though there's some things that would naturally push them apart. They come together, and it alternates between their stories, and you see them as they grow up and how they got to where they are, and how the situations that they faced, the very difficult, challenging situations that they faced, helped to mold them, and how they were able to learn from them, grow from these situations, to have more pleasant experiences, to come together, to find each other, and to learn and continue to grow together. Was very inspiring. It was cool for me because Justin, I'm from Detroit, and he was from Detroit, and he talked about places that I was familiar with, places that I've gone, and so I could relate to a lot of his experiences, even beyond that. And so there are things that have to do with, obviously, race. There are things that have to do with mental health, family dynamics that are talked about in here. That it's just it's an impressive book, and if any of those things are hitting the note with you, I would strongly urge you to pick this up. Redefining Normal by Justin and Alexis Black. It's a powerful book. It says on the back cover, growing up, they didn't believe they had a future. Together, they are building forever. Excellent book. I read it so fast, could not put it down once I started reading it. So again, if any of that stuff sounds even remotely interesting to you, highly recommend that you give this one a try. Next up is a book that I've had on my bookshelf for a long time. I bought it and it just sat there, and I've sort of been nudging myself to start to read more books that I have on the shelves that I have not been reading. And one day I was just sitting there and I kept staring at it. It's on the bookshelf on nearest to my couch, and I said, you know what, let me just grab it. And I went and grabbed it, and I'm glad I did, even though it totally reminds me of a book that's right here over my right shoulder. The School for Dangerous Girls by Elliot Schreffer. Hopefully I got that right. So it has to do with the school that's just kind of out there, way far away, and it's where dangerous girls are sent, and there's mystery surrounding what's going on at the school. There are unsavory people running the school, and there's a mystery other place out there that the kids that are there have to discover, and it just it's a really engaging story. It says here, this part here, I'll read this part. The school's mission is clear: to take girls who've caused trouble and to reform them into model citizens. And the main character in the story, she gets in there, and she is probably closer to normal than she is troubled. And it reminded me of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a little bit in how that character's story is a little bit. And she starts to see very clearly what's going on, and that there are some really bad things going on. And she tries to get her mom to see that there's some really bad things going on, and mom comes in, and the staff they are smooth. They have done this before. They know how to play the parent, and the staff plays it perfectly. She ends up staying there, and the story continues. But it's a really interesting story. It's one of those stories where you look at the cover, and it might turn some people off a little bit. The School for Dangerous Girls, it's not necessarily the most creative title to some people, but it grabbed me. It was interesting, and it reminded me of another book that I have back here, The Castle School for Troubled Girls by Alyssa Scheinwell. That was a book that I read, and this one is almost exactly the same book, so it was very interesting. At times I thought, man, I feel like I'm reading the same book. So, but an interesting story. Glad I picked it up. And lastly, I read one of the hottest releases of the summer that a lot of people have been anticipating, because this author is a lot of people's automatic buy, and that is The House Across the Lake from Riley Sager. Yes, The House Across the Lake from Riley Sager finally dropped. A lot of people are excited. So, The House Across the Lake, what is it? It is, if you've seen the movie Rear Window, the classic movie Rear Window, it is that, and a lot of people use the Rear Window concept because it makes for a good story. It's interesting. There's also a voyeurism concept. So if you remember the movie Sliver from the early 90s with Sharon Stone, and it was based on the book by Ira Levin. So there's a little bit of that going on as well. But this is really, you know what? A lot of people were disappointed with Survive the Night, his book that dropped last year, which I thought it was solid, but not his best book. It had some flaws for sure, but it was a solid read. It was a fast read. It was an interesting read. Took me back to the 1990s. So fast forward to this one, The House Across the Lake. I am a huge fan of the Rear Window story, and so I was automatically hooked on that one. This book, to me, it started out fast. It was and it was engaging read right off the bat. It really got into it, and I really loved what he was doing. It lulled a little bit, probably about middle of the second act, so middle of the book, it kind of lulled a little bit, but then it picked back up. It really got going, and Riley Sager does a great job of building suspense, developing characters typically, though some people don't like the way he develops women characters, but he did a good job of really setting the scene and creating the creepy vibe, which is really good and is an art form, believe me. And so it was going really well, and then at about 80%, boom! It just like completely changed, and I will stay spoiler free, but it goes in a completely different direction at about the 80-85% point of the book, and I guarantee you nobody had any idea where it was going to go at 80-85% because it takes a dramatic turn and goes into a very different type of book, but it was a fun read. Glad I read it. Riley Sager still an automatic buy for me. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed it more than Survive the Night. So I'm excited. I will continue to read Riley Sager books. I am still a big Riley Sager fan. This one was, it was solid. I wish he would have stayed on that track that he was on and finished it that way, but he went in a different direction because he always throws that double twist at the end. So I was waiting for it, and I got the first twist, and then the second twist came along, and he got me on the second twist. Riley, you got me. Aha! On the second twist. So anyway, The House Across the Lake, solid read by Riley Sager. So there you have it, my 5 books that I read for the month of June 2022. A fun reading month, a really good and productive reading month for me. I hope it was likewise for you.